that whole extractive financialist system is so far beyond bankrupt that it is not redeemable. There is no way to redeem it. The only way in which we do not go through a Roman collapse, a Roman-like collapse, I suspect that what's going to happen is we're going to have to reset back to the last clean copy of our civilization.
A previous petition election, an election High Court judge stated this on record, ready? That the UK's elections are so corrupt, it would make a banana republic blush. That's on record from a High Court judge stating that. If you do not have recourse to the law, and if you do not have a ballot, you are a slave. The laws of England are the birthright of the people thereof. I am an Englishman and I am claiming my right to free elections.
Remember, right? You're in the UK, actually anywhere, get a VPN. If you want to be able to access all sorts of perspectives that the government thinks are dangerous for you, get a VPN. nordvpn.com/cryptorich. Okay? When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes a duty. So said Thomas Jefferson. Go to bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make-war-history and find out why it is a criminal offence to pay central government or local government taxes in the UK. And let's make war history. Hey, Ian, thank you so much for making yourself available.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. I do learn loads from our conversations, so appreciate it. And we are recording this on Friday, the 24th of October, 11 minutes past 6 as I speak.
As you live and breathe.
As I live and breathe, right? And before we started recording, you and I started talking about the situation in Pakistan. And we have just been about to be joined by Mr. Graham Moore. What happened a few weeks ago was there was a demonstration in Pakistan by an extremist, like a fundamentalist Islamic group, and then also Afghanistan attacked Pakistan on the border. And I had a conversation with Susan Kuginder and Alex Craner and Tom Luongo on the video I recorded with them last week, and they weren't too clear. But thinking about it subsequently, I do suspect the hand of the British, because the Pakistani government was cozying up to Trump. And this fundamentalist extremist party, Muslim party, well, that's reeks of MI6. Then there's all the unrest going on in Balochistan, which is very rich in rare earth minerals and possibly oil, gas and coal. And the people there are very restive against the Punjabis and the Sindhis. So I suspect the British there. And then Afghanistan attacks Pakistan. And that bit I'm puzzled by, and I'm just curious for your take on it. And sorry, Graham, we started this conversation before we came on, right? So once we finish this, we'll go to our usual stuff about the Constitution of England and what's happening and how it's being destroyed and what we can do.
And there may be actually a direct connection here that goes back to the Act of Settlement, by the way, right? So we'll tie it back. Yeah. We own the Taliban. We armed them. We spent 20 years training them.
Being the Americans or the British?
The Americans.
Okay.
Right. Well, factions, right? Everything's factions. But, we spent 20 years heavily investing in developing the Afghanis into a force that we could use to threaten and destabilize Central Asia.
Okay.
So that resource and capability, and we continued to pay them $40 million a week, left them roughly $90 billion in equipment, warfighting equipment, built all the warfighting infrastructure, et cetera, right? Over 20 years. $8 trillion, $10 trillion poured in there. Now, 80% of that money, probably 90%, never went there and flew back out into, offshore accounts of people. But point being is that once you have, this is something Tom would talk about, right? A depreciating asset. Once you have an asset, though, even if it was one of the resentfuls factions who built it, doesn't mean that the responsibles faction, if necessary, shouldn't use it. And so maybe the British were, and I agree with your assessment, this British occupier, this parasite to the, plague and parasite to the world, was trying to stir up some trouble there in Pakistan. And one wonders if we sent the Taliban as a warning, calm it all down, right? That there's a counter to the British efforts And it's this capability that we built in Afghanistan at great expense and lives and resources and etc. Right? Because one of the things, and then, okay, so tied to that is, and this gets the conversation you and I believe had last time, and I've had several times with others here since, the region of the world and a populace that is something like 1/5 the world's population, the greater Indian peoples, is in uncontrolled space. And the only ones that have any kind of influence and control there, outside of the Russians, are the British. And so one wonders, one has to expect that there's going to be all kinds of trouble in that, from that vector. The British are going to use that vector, the greater Indian peoples, as much as they can until they're forced not to stop. And so I suspect, the way in which this would have to be done is alliances would have to be shifted to the United States. And that's a careful, delicate dance of back and forth violence and influence and capital and trade deals and, and outright assassinations and all kinds of things. It takes a little bit of time.
Interesting.
Right? And that threat vector, that same threat vector that's from there, extends out everywhere that there are, greater Indian peoples, and they are everywhere. Everywhere that the British Empire was, they are there in great numbers.
Yeah. South Africa, Kenya, Australia,
everywhere.
Canada.
Exactly. Yeah, and they're in leadership and any substantive institutional managerial structure. They're there in leadership, high-ranking positions, etc. This is no accident. And it's not necessarily that it's all nefarious either. It's that the greater Indian peoples were the back, so the Scots built the British Empire. If you look managerial wise, governors, all of that, most of them were Scots, but there wasn't enough Scots. And so who do we fill the middle management positions with? Capable Indians. And on the mercantile side of, on the governance side, administrative side, on the mercantile side, we filled it with Cantonese Chinese who are very good at the mercantilism stuff. And if you look around the former British Empire, the Commonwealth, and former colonies, you'll see the pockets of Indian Pakistanis that go back some time and the Chinese. So it's not necessarily nefarious, right? However, now it's the British infrastructure that's a lingering thing. So this actually ties back in then, because this is something I'm trying to work through and understand, right? And strangely enough, just my life is so weird. I had a total person, I won't mention his name, but person people know, reach out to me and say, I got a guy you should talk to. They want some. He reached out to me because he wants some help with working out India-Pakistan security stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I was in first group, but I know nothing about these things, right? This is like 5 months ago. And I was like, I'm not sure I could help you, right? But it got me thinking and looking, and then here we are 5 months later, and I'm like, oh, right? So anyways, back to the Act of Settlement, right? So this gets, so we have...
Before we get into the Act of Settlement, let us introduce Mr. Graham Moore.
Mr. Moore.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Yes. And I think I should introduce both of you. So Ian, how I describe you. Hold on a second. Let me just change your name because it says Emirio Corporate. Yeah. Now, what I'll do is I'll put something over that in the video, I'll edit it out, okay? And I'll cut this bit out.
Awesome.
So Ian, how I describe you, I was describing you to a friend of mine where I'm staying this weekend, which is why people can see that the background's a bit different. I'm in a different office, as you can tell. Ian's a historian and a writer, because that's what you are for me. You've done many, many things.
Yeah.
And then Graham, you are the head of the English Constitution Society and the English Constitution Party, and a common law lawyer par excellence.
Well, I'm grateful for the title of par excellence. I'm waiting now for the second highest court in England, and 3 appeal court appellant judges to give us the answer to last week's case. But if anyone doesn't know about that, just to let you all know, it was extremely well attended in the Royal Courts of Justice. Over 90 people turned up. The 3 appellant judges stopped the actual case and said we need to open up a second court to get all these people in because justice needs to be seen to be done. And they was very accommodating. We was all lovely and polite. They absolutely loved our group because we've got people with disabilities, we've got retirees, all different colours of people, which I always love, because when they sit there and start saying you're English, you're racist, I said, so why have we got black and brown people that are our members if we are racist? That is complete and utter rubbish. So yeah, that is what I do. The English.
You want to just give a little background to that case, and we will come to the Act of Settlement. Ian, please.
So the background to the case is I stood in an election. I've stood in a number of elections in England, and what we actually done was we caught them cheating at the count. And because under English law, and it goes back centuries, there's something called the Court of Common Pleas. And part of the Court of Common Pleas was brought into the King's Bench Division, but they've still got this process called an election petition. And that means a single candidate, a single elector, if it's to do with Parliament, can bring a case, go straight into the High Court. There's a special court called an election petition court, and they listen to the case, and then two judges travel to wherever it is in the country. This is why it goes back to ancient rights. That doesn't happen anymore unless it's an election petition. So two judges, High Court judges, pick up their suitcases with all their paperwork, go to that area, create a court, and so now provide your evidence. So if there's any Americans listening to this, and obviously the current company in this video, it's the nearest we've still got to a grand jury, because the British stole and took away our grand juries in I think it was 1929. But this is still there, but instead of it going to members of the public as a jury, it still goes in front of a tribunal, which technically is administrative law, but it's still using the common law principles. So basically, they try to get the case thrown out. We was not only successful in the first court hearing, legal arguments for a day and a half against two King's Counsels, which means at a higher level they've taken silk, and probably about another 4 barristers, and then an army of solicitors, and then there was me. And I won all of the legal arguments, including the fact that the judges stated in a cost order, believe it or not, that and this was against the Royal Mail as well, who's part of it, the judges actually stated they was grossly disproportionate costs from the Royal Mail, and reduced their costs from £80,000 to £12,500, and almost, not quite, but almost accused them of fraud. Right? So, and this was all in an order, by the way. I was reading it thinking, wow, I can't believe that they're coming out this strong. And they basically said the trial goes ahead. Now, what happened then, it should take a year, 18 months for an appeal, but they managed to get an appeal in inside a week, right? And then I'm up in front of 3 appellant judges at the Royal Courts of Justice, again presenting our case for the people. The other side's King's Counsel managed to aggravate the judges so much that one of the judges actually started shouting at him. So there's an old saying, it either comes from Napoleon or Sun Tzu, and that is, when the enemy is destroying itself, don't get involved. Just let them carry on destroying their case. So for 2 hours, he went round and round in circles, aggravated all 3 judges, I must say, right? The judges then gave us 2, this was a few days before, gave us 2 cases to look at, which I studied. And out of all the so-called legal professionals in that court that day, I was the only one to mention them, the only one to thank the judges for putting those cases to us and suggesting they should be part of the bundle. And I read through it, and basically they listened to my arguments. I only stood up for 20 minutes, and everyone, because I can't see myself or understand what's going on in the background with all the people watching, But everyone said to me, trust me, they was absolutely glued to every word you said, right? So I kept it short, kept it about our history, kept it about the actual law, and they just thanked me for being succinct. And then they said, we're going to hand down the judgment. We don't know how long it's going to take, but we're aware of the trial, which is a week on Monday in Chester. That's a 3-day trial where I am technically prosecuting the returning officer and Sarah Pouchin MP for Reform UK. And notice, everyone watching this, she's never ever mentioned it. She's one of the ones trying to stop it getting to trial on technicalities, and the High Court are saying, this is going ahead, right? So we're still waiting for their judgment. But they have contacted me the other side today and said that we are preparing a bundle for trial. Meaning, obviously, they're taking it seriously. It won't look very good for them if they haven't prepared for trial. It looks as if they took it for granted it was going to get thrown out. But it hasn't been thrown out. The arguments was put there. And again, just to make sure people are aware of this, I don't do it for money. So all my knowledge of law and the cases is for everyone. The English Constitution protects everyone. Don't matter what colour you are. Technically, doesn't matter what religion you are. As long as, I mean, the English Bill of Rights forbids Sharia, for example, but it also forbids, you can't have Christian laws either. So in other words, what I'm saying is, whilst we've got a Christian-based legal system, which it is, if the local vicar was to decide that you've done something wrong and wants to lock you in the vestry for a week and fine you £1,000, he can't do that under the English Constitution. Well, it's the same for Sharia, Jewish law, Hindu law. It doesn't matter. You cannot have religious.
Well, Graham, this is why I say you are a common law lawyer par excellence, as determined by Crypto Rich channel, and EM would back me up on this. He seconds my motion.
Oh, extraordinary! I have people on different channels of my work, my writing and stuff. I just had someone comment on you this morning. I wrote a piece yesterday about a civilization's immune system, and they took excerpts from that and tied it to your work and referenced you. So
Fabulous.
I had no idea who this person was, but
I'm going to have the links to your platforms in the description. I do invite people to check it out. And this last thing on the trial, and then we'll move on, because you want to speak about the Act of Settlement. I'm curious about that as well, as one of our constitutional statutes. Is it a trial by jury?
So it's 2 High Court judges. There is no jury, but they are the highest judges. They're literally 2 Supreme Court judges. Or they're law lords. It's not. It's at the highest level. And people, I mean, I've got personal friends who are barristers, and one who's a solicitor keeps ringing me up and saying, Graham, wow, I can't believe you've just won against them people, right? So when you keep pushing forward, as long as you are respectful in the court, you are respectful with the law of the land, and respectful to the seniority of the people you are talking to, right? Which is one of the most brutal facts of the last case. The King's Counsel wasn't very respectful to them, and they wasn't very respectful back either. So again, if you're sitting there as the humble man, the free man, and saying, listen, I'm just an Englishman, you need to understand
petition
what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's great.
The brilliance of what His Majesty King Alfred set in motion as what would become the English civilization is that even a common man can bring a petition to the king.
Exactly that. And
right,
again,
to the courts of the king, right? And there is a respect that is naturally given between both the High Court and the common man. This is something very unique to English civilization, and it has helped shape the world and keeps us around. Graham, I have some questions actually related to the case before we can come to Act of Settlement in a bit, but is this related to a single voting incident? Is it related to multiple voting incidents? If it's happening if it's happening in one area, of course it's happening in all areas, so are there other related cases being argued by others than you?
Well, so what they don't like about me is I have stood in many elections. I've also been what's known as a count agent in many elections. So in other words, I have seen this happen in other elections.
Yeah, of course.
One of them, for example, was George Galloway, Batley and Spen, where I actually wrote a full statement out for George Galloway. Now I've spoken with George Galloway previously, anyone who knows me knows that I do not believe in his politics. I am not a communist. I don't believe in communism or fascism. I am an Englishman, right? So, again, I witnessed it at. He had the election stolen off him in Batley and Spen, and because
I think Andrew Bridgen as well. Andrew
Bridgen is another one. In fact, they actually swapped out the whole count team just before the election with Andrew Bridgen, right? And put their own people in place. That's what they do. They're almost like trained. I've tried to explain to people how simple this is. Imagine a magician, and a magician has assistants. They carry out the illusion with everyone trained in the illusion. It's not just about the magician, right? And what I've said is, when you get to a count, the returning officer is the magician. His assistants are some of the counters, the
hand waving,
not all of them. That's it. And all about sleight of hand. And they create that illusion. So, getting to your question, I've seen it on a number of occasions. They did it to me at last in 2016 when I stood against Sadiq Khan in Tooting. Well, he'd stood down at Tooting because he'd become the mayor of London, and I stood in that election. And they give me 50 votes. So if anyone doesn't know, they clip the votes in 50s, right? So they clip them in general or by-elections in 50 votes. 10 years later, I get exactly 50 votes in where I stood in Runcorn and Hillsby. Statistically, that's an impossibility. It's actually 1 million elections to 1. It's obvious you cannot, because they're different demographics, different people, but it just so happens that they clipped the bundles at 50. And because the election, there was only 6 votes in it, I actually personally saw well in excess of 100 votes, right? So I wasn't expecting to win, but in the last election before the one I just stood in, I got 1,007 votes. So getting 50 votes when you stand for retirees, bearing in mind the electorate is getting older, and bearing in mind that they're being attacked financially, as soon as they know we're standing, they're like, I'm voting for him. He's the only one who speaks. He's the only party speaking for us. And the disabled do the same. So to get 50 votes in 2 different demographics 10 years apart is completely impossible. And we've got expert witnesses that are coming to court to say that. So has it happened before? Yeah. Have I witnessed it? Yes. Is it systemic? That's what they're terrified of, because I'm actually going to stand up and tell the 2 High Court judges exactly the method of operation of how the fraud works. Once it's been told in court and it is on record, everyone says, so that's how you're carrying out this fraud, right?
And then, now you've set precedent, right? You've created precedent. Yeah. So have you, do you have other brilliant folks like you who are also standing with these arguments in other areas? Of course, they're not at your, a par excellence level, but maybe they're at par. So do you have others like you standing to courts in other areas? Because otherwise it's one thing in one area at one time, and the machine doesn't care because it's moved on and it's doing it so many times, and right?
Yeah, no, there are other people, but we're also training people. Okay. We do seminars, and then so the seminars are crucial because it's education. It's not left wing, right wing, or anything. We're not interested in that. We're only interested in a rule. The
law is neutral. Yeah.
And then what we do is actually show people this is what the law is. Did you know that? And then you could get, let's say there's 200 people at a seminar. You may get 5 that turn around and say, I want to take this further. I'm a retiree. I was successful in business. I was successful in a career. I want to learn what the Constitution actually means and how to get it implemented. So you may only get 5, but if you think, if we're doing one seminar a month, and you look at, 5 people a month, and then you start to train these people who are not part of the bar, right? So there is no allegiance to the king as such. What the allegiance is to the rule of law, and we're the only people doing it.
Yeah. So one further question: are you brilliant legal scholars also looking at the way in which the magician's going to change his trick?
Yeah. And we're already lined up for that. Because, so just to make sure the audience is.
And are you getting that into this record as well with this chord of here's how they did it here, but here's how they can do it?
Right. So a previous petition election, an election High Court judge stated this on record, ready? That the UK's elections are so corrupt, it would make a banana republic blush, right? That's on record from a High Court judge stating that. You can go and Google it and it will come up and you can read his comments. One case in particular, funny enough, in Scotland, right? Someone had called an election petition, and when it got, I think, 3 days or 4 days from the actual trial, guess what happened? All of the ballots went missing. Every ballot had disappeared, right? That's, again, all on record, right? So we know what they're doing is explaining it to people and to say, if you do not have recourse to the law, and if you do not have a ballot, you are a slave.
Yes.
Because the returning officer and his cronies are appointing members of parliament. That is not English law. It is forbidden in England, goes all the way back to the first statute of Westminster 1275. We had a great discussion with the judges at the High Court because they said that the representation of the People's Act 1983 was basically consolidating and bringing in all the different acts. And I said, that is true. But it also brings in, as part of that consolidation, it brings in the first statute of Westminster of 1275, the English Bill of Rights of 1689. It brings in everything, including the Declaration of Rights, the Declaration of Reasons, and most importantly, it brings in the Acts of Settlement. And then when I spoke about the Acts of Settlement of 1701 in the High Court, and I said, it's still law. Chapter 4, it states, the laws of England are the birthright of the people thereof. I am an Englishman and I am claiming my right to free elections. Right? The judges was like, wow, we get it. And then they, again, it's took so far just over a week. But like someone's just said to me today, if they wanted to say no, it would have been no like that. They only study and think very hard about their judgment if they're changing the law or doing something that's in your favour, because they don't want that to be misused in the future, because that judgment could be used in 100 years' time.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Graham, that's extraordinary. I have read that in the Acts of Settlement, that our laws are our natural birthright. So naturally we have the right of expression. Because you listen to babies, they don't ask for permission before they will, right? We naturally have the right of free association. We naturally have the right of owning property, of having property. Because one of the things that I'm curious about is what are the protections within the English Constitution against digital IDs?
Yeah, well, digital ID, everyone should be aware of this. It is only about control. And the reason why they try to bring in earlier on a COVID pass, because that was the initiation, if you want to call it that, of digital ID. But people need to be aware of something else. And I'm hoping your audience already know this. If you don't, you should do. In 2014, the inaugural conference of digital nations took place in London and partly at Buckingham Palace, where the British, Israel, Estonia, and there were 2 other nations, it was called the Digital Five, had already crafted exactly what's going on now, right? So this isn't a new thing. They've been planning this for a very long time, and it is all about control and complete control of the people. Because once they've got you with digital ID, you can't get access to the internet, you can't get access to your money, central bank, digital currency, programmable, all of it is an absolute nightmare for the people, because once it actually happens, you will find it very difficult, if not impossible, to reverse out of. And all you've got to do is think about the USSR and what happened with them. I mean, bearing in mind they used to queue up for 3 hours for bread, right? And they told their people, yes, but the people of the West are queuing up for 10 hours. We're still doing better than them, when it was a complete lie. But the people in them bread queues for 3 hours every single day, believed that they was doing better than us.
No,
The whole thing was propaganda.
Solzhenitsyn actually cut through that. He said they knew it was a lie, and that the liars knew that we knew it was a lie, and yet they lied, and we went along with the lie. So I have a sneaking suspicion, right? I have a sneaking suspicion that the entire digital ID is just theater. They expect it to fail. Now, if they can get it through, great, but they expect it to fail. It is the great Satan distraction from what's happening economically and what's happening with ethnic replacement and what's happening with the total and absolute co-option of liberal democracy.
You think it's a distraction?
I think it's a distraction. Now, it's got to be all in.
I wouldn't disagree with that, is the answer. I don't trust anything that they do, and anything that they start promoting as we need you to rile up against this. And there's a certain individual that I've seen that is riling up against this, and I've seen that person previously. Do not trust that person at all. I won't say who the person is, but I'm telling you now, what makes me think it's a distraction.
They recently went to Israel, I believe, and they organized a big demonstration, this other person, which I didn't go on.
So I suspect, right, that all of this stuff, now if they can get away with it, they'll, yeah, of course, right? But I suspect all of this bugs, eating bugs, and all and the digital IDs and the CBDCs and all of it, I think it's all just theater specifically designed to get us all riled up over here. Meanwhile, we're being totally ethnically replaced in our own communities, and not just physically, but economically, property-wise, etc. And the entire economic system, financial system, is beyond bankrupt.
Yeah.
And so it's what you would do.
Massively beyond bankrupt.
Massively. There's no recovery.
I'm going to push back against that, because I think the digital ID will coalesce with the CBDCs, which is an antidote, their cure for the bankruptcy.
Nope. It won't work. And they know it.
It's another form of fear.
Why won't it work?
The fear.
Well, because you can't. Okay, give me 1 second. It won't work because there is no more to financialize.
Okay, but they can cancel the currency and say, okay, we're going digital. CBDCs, here they are, connected to your digital ID. This is
it doesn't matter. The rest of the world has to agree to it. England can't, the United Kingdom can't feed itself, can't produce anything. And it's not importing people that can do any of that. And so it has to buy goods and services from overseas to even sustain itself at all at the basic level. And the rest of the world isn't going to agree to use their CBD currency system. Okay. The whole thing, and here's the other piece, okay? The other piece is that it doesn't work thermodynamically. All of these things run up against hard thermodynamic and energy conservation law restraints.
Okay, now
it's all.
Now, before I go there, because I know you said you're an engineer, that's very, very interesting, right? But what about a situation where there's a dual currency? There's an internal CBDC, and then some sort of, I don't know, bomb.
Well, they're going to try. They're going to try, but again, they're going to try, but it won't work. And I don't think they know. I don't think that they can. I believe, so two different groups of people, right? You got the managerial level people, they're all in on it, right? This is how we do it. But then you got the ones that actually developed it, rolled it out, the higher, like Tom says, right? The folks at the that own, so you got the people who are the supplicant at the high table, you got the people that sit at the high table, and then you got the people that own the high table, right? And the folks that own the high table know it's not going to work. Oh, they're going to give it a good try, and they're going to hand it off to the people sitting at the table to promote, so that the supplicants at the table will really try to do it, right, as a way to sustain. But it won't work thermodynamically. It won't work.
It's a bit like when and by the way, this was a major issue. It was a bit like the 2008 crash, right? And Gordon Brown comes in as the big hero and says we're gonna create all this money and flooded electronically. It's the same thing again, right? Instead of dealing with a problem, what they're doing is fluffing around it and making a problem bigger and bigger, like it's getting a bigger and bigger balloon before it actually bursts. But once it's burst, it'll be far worse than anyone's ever seen before. And just to make sure people understand this, Iceland knew exactly what was going on. The people of Iceland stood up in Iceland with pots and pans outside in a massive demonstration. Started with one person, right? The pot and pan outside Iceland. Next day there was 5. The day after that was 10. Then there was 100,000 of them, and they couldn't hear themselves think in that parliament. They come out of the parliament and said to the people, "What do you want?" And they said, "We want the finance minister put on trial for fraud. We want the entire government to go," and they go now. And the whole government went. And this is what the new president of Iceland said. By the way, you can go and look at this on Google or on YouTube. He actually had a message for Gordon Brown. "You are not welcome in my country. Do not come to my country." In other words, they was telling Gordon Brown, if you turn up and set foot in Iceland, we are going to arrest you for what you've done to Iceland.
For incitement.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Now, Ian, I thank you, Graham. That was fascinating. Yeah. I'm going to look that one up. I don't think CBDCs are going to work. Perhaps, it's such a technical nightmare. It's implausible. It's just not going to work. Too much resistance, lots of hacks and all of that. Same with the digital ID. I don't think it's going to be successful.
It's all
I'm interested in your thermodynamic argument, and I'm just going to disappear off screen for a couple of minutes because my power is about to go out.
Gotcha.
Please carry on.
Yeah. So what they're trying to do as the base of the financial system, and I hear Tom Longo's touched on it, and Elon Musk's commented on it, etc. And I've heard, supposedly big-brained people, but maybe not so big-brained, right? Just linguistically skilled people articulate that the new, it's this quantum financial system, right? This quantum finance. What the tech bros are trying to do, and the technopoly is trying to do, is move from capital finance assets being a derivative of production, physical production and labor, to a derivative of energy production. That's what they're trying to do. It's part of why they're building out all these data centers and everything else. It's because what they're trying to do is say that the value of an economy is not what it produces, but how much energy it utilizes. The problem is that, one, that's an economy that produces nothing but energy and digits and binary code in all of its various forms, and you can't eat any of that. You can't. It's just ludicrous. It's nonsense. And what do you wind up doing with that? Well, you wind up with a very small number of people who are producing energy and then building vastly complex technological solutions like blockchain, Bitcoin mining, right? And at some point, and then for the vast numbers of everybody else, they're just kept slaves. That's why they want the CBDCs and the digital IDs and all that, because they're going to have to apportion out to them resources, because the only ones that will be able to afford to buy any of the foods and rents and everything else will be these few people that have these massive data sets. So the whole thing is ludicrous, and it's the inevitable result of handing the world over to tech bros. And I've been in tech for 40 some odd years, right? So the concept and idea that as a species, we are going to transition from wealth being a product of physical human labor, whether it's cognitive labor, intellectual labor, or physical labor, or some combination of the two, to human wealth is going to be a product of energy utilization, straight up electrical energy utilization in complex systems and machines is ludicrous. And at some point, it runs up against the laws of thermodynamics, where the inputs to build the energy utilizing, the dissipative structures to use all the energy production becomes too expensive. You can't produce enough energy. Now, we still got some ways to go there, et cetera. But the other piece is what value does an individual human being have then? Their Twitter account? And how much electricity they're using in these complex, computer systems around the world? and how much, computer systems in the surveillance state are used to monitor and maintain. You know what I mean? It's a ludicrous concept and idea to move, but they're all in on it, right? But it's a ludicrous and the reason they're all in on it is because then you don't run into zero-sum issues. It's infinitely expandable. They, in their mind, it's infinitely expandable, etc. The problem is it's purely synthetic. It's purely artificial. It's completely inhumane. You wind up wiping out. This is why they want to wipe out the populace, because they don't need them, because they can actually just use agents. That's why they're doing all these virtual partners and companions and stuff. Is because they can actually mimic. They could grow the population if they're able to transition to this whole economy as a energy utilization rather than human production and labor. Right? Even if human production and labor is augmented by machines, that's still a different thing. But if they can do this, they have an infinitely expandable economy that doesn't need people, because they'll just add more agents and more computational resources and more energy production. And humans are just messy, and sometimes they have revolutions, and you got to feed them actual real food, and then you got to deal with the body waste and all, right?
Yeah.
So the issue is this, and there's a great book by Nick Bostrom called Superintelligence. And it's what they're all working off of. Right. It came out years ago. It's a brilliant book, right? But in their mind, and I've known some of these people personally for 25, 30 years. In their mind, this is how you get to be a type 1 civilization. And that's the holy grail for them. The problem is the way they're looking to go about this to get to a type 1 civilization, which is actually for me too, I want us to do that, right? But the way in which they're going about it is you get rid of the humans. Yeah. It's the only way. Humans cost too much. They're too energy, you can't control. There's too much. So that's one piece. And again, that all runs up against hard thermodynamics and conservation, laws of conservation of energy stuff at some point, right? Okay, and we're pretty close to it. The other thing is, though, and I've been writing on this the last 2 days actually, article yesterday and the article day before. A single cell in our body is more computationally rich and more energy efficient than all the computational resources on Earth combined. That's one cell out of tens of trillions in our own body and bio, right? Tens or hundreds of trillions. Whatever we're trying to build, like blockchain, I wrote a piece about blockchain yesterday and how it pales in comparison as an artificial immune system, which is what they're trying to build. It doesn't even remotely come close to even some function within a single cell. The point being is that 4.5 billion years of life have made every one of our cells in our body this ludicrously capable, self-sustaining, self-repairing, self-adapting, self-learning quantum computational resource. And we have tens of trillions of them, if not hundreds of trillions, that make up every single human being. How the hell are you going to compete with that with technologies that pale in comparison?
That's very good, Ian. I want to move this on because I'm conscious of the time, right? But that's a really good point, because human beings haven't come up with anything like bird flight or anything like bottled milk is so poor compared to mother's milk. Schooling is so awful.
Anything synthetic. Everything synthetic is a gross. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, very good. Great. Right. Now, let's bring in the Act of Settlement.
The Act of Settlement, yes.
Act of Settlement, one of the constitutional statutes. Is it 1700? I think
1701.
Oh, it's close.
Yeah. That's what
we're talking about in 1700.
So the Act of Settlement is a crucial part of the original revolution, the Glorious Revolution, for the simple reason, and it actually states it in the title, that is for further securing the rights and liberties of the people. But one of the
native peoples.
No. It was also to make sure that the Protestant line of the throne continued, right? So, but the major parts of the Acts of Union, and this is the simple thing that people don't understand, and how bad the English, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, Cornish have been betrayed by the British regime in 1948. But so just to make sure people are aware of this, we lost the Second World War, right? We lost the Second World War to the Soviet Union and communism. In 1948, the Attlee Labour government passed through an Act of Parliament called the British Nationality Act of 1948, and it's Schedule 4, hidden in that Act, and there is a reason why that is such a bad thing to do, because it's ultra-vires. It actually removed a crucial and critical protection of the Scots, the English, the Welsh and the Irish and the Cornish, right? And that protection mechanism was basically to have any position of authority, including MP, judges, police constables, mayors. Just think about all the mayors you've currently got in place that shouldn't be in place, and anyone in council authorities. What the actual settlement said was, you cannot have any of them positions of authority or power or profit unless you are born of English parents, right? Plural, right? That didn't just mean English, by the way. If you actually read the actual settlement, it tells you, but if you're a Scot, because we already had a
union.
We had a common law union in 1603.
Yeah.
That was already agreed, right? So it wasn't a statutory union; it was a common law union. So a Scot, we were vice versa. You could interact with a Scot, and it weren't a problem, or a Welshman or an Irishman, and it would be virtually the same, right? So you was considered an Englishman, or they were dominions, right? So, and not colonies, which is crucially important. So in 1948, the Attlee government passed an Act of Parliament called the British Nationality Act 1948 at Schedule 4. It removed that. Because it removed it by stealth and no one knew, it's unlawful, because that's a constitutional Act of Parliament.
Sorry, how do you mean no one knew, Graham? It's in the statute. If I go to the Gov.
So what I'm saying is, so let me be clear on nobody knew. It's already been stated in another case, and a more recent case, which was Sunderland versus Thornton. It's otherwise metric.
Sunderland versus Thorburn, the metric martyrs.
Right, so metric martyr case, and Justice Laws had actually stated, if you are going to take away the rights of the people, and it is constitutional law or common law rights, you must state that on the face of the bill and take the political consequence for doing it, right? So in other words, you cannot bury something that's stealing your right and removing your right in a schedule, which is where it was. I mean, I can take you to stuff you wouldn't even work it out. It's almost in code, right? And you say that's not on the bill, and it's buried so deeply that no one would really pick up on it, right? Talking about us, but the people that brought it forward were already of the communist regime, right? So, and again, and by the way, it wasn't just the Attlee government. Anyone out there who's singing their praises for Margaret Thatcher, she did the same thing in 1981 with the British Nationality Act of 1981, which erased anyone born after 1981 was no longer English, Scottish, Welsh or Irish. You could only be British. And the last people who did that was Joseph Stalin, who was the Commissar of Identity in the USSR. They mirrored what they'd done. And why did they mirror that? Because it come from the British in the first place. People don't realise how this fits in, and I'm talking about
the USSR was a British experiment. It was a live test of the evolution of the British system, the Venetian Dutch City of London system.
And if you go back to this, is why Putin has said on a number of occasions, "We are not part of your Roman Empire."
Yeah.
Right? The reason why he has said that is because the British were an extension of the Roman Empire, and I'm talking about the Holy Roman Empire, not the Holy Roman See. Two separate things.
Yes.
So
Henry VIII didn't care about divorce. Henry VIII was trying to break free of the Second Rome.
Exactly that, which is communism. So in communism, you only have two types of people. You have the plebs or plebeians, and then patriots, which are like the lords, and then you have a third class that's not recognized. They're called slaves.
Yeah,
and that's what they're trying to do.
Or the gulag, the folks going to gulags. Yeah,
and that's what they want to reduce us to.
Graham, sorry, Rich.
I said that's what they want to reduce us to.
Well, it's pretty much what they've already done, and that's why they're bringing out all of this CBDC and all this other stuff. It's not necessarily just going to work. It doesn't need to. They already have total control. It's a distract away from other things that they're doing. And more importantly, what it is, okay, so here's a suspicion. I don't know this because I haven't reasoned this out, but, in unrestricted warfare, this is what I would be doing, right? There are a whole lot of folks, older Xers and boomers, who are retiring, who are rather intelligent people, right? Educated back before all of the nonsense. And they got time on their hands. And they love and care about their civilization and their history and their culture. And you could see what you're doing happening with 1 million people across the country looking at 5,000 different things that have been done. Boy, I'd sure want to head that off. I'd sure want all that brain power fighting something else that doesn't really matter, so they don't go in and undo, like you're saying, right? The 48 Atlee thing that was hidden. There's all kinds of those that can be undone.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why they don't like us, because what we've done is reverse engineered with you, not just me, a whole team of us saying you did this, and we can take you all the way back through history, showing that it's systemic, going well back to the 1800s.
Well, and really actually going back to the 1680s, going back to the 1680s, because they started it all there. Yeah.
But just on a quick note on that, because I made a couple of notes as you were speaking before. Communism has never worked, right? The electronic system that they're trying to implement is the same as communism, just on an electronic scale.
It's digital. Yeah.
They know it's not going to work, and the point is to get rid of the people. But it's an expansion. It's almost it's like the lunatics are running the asylum. You've got these people that have got no understanding of how society really works. But just the second point is, it's been mentioned a couple of times with gross domestic product. Well, I've never believed that you should measure a society on GDP. I believe you should measure a society on the happiness of the people, which is part of the American Constitution and the American independence. It's about happiness. It is not about how much money you earn or what you produce. It's about everyone in society gels together as a happy group of people.
So, Graham, go back and read the article I wrote 2 days ago on X or Substack. It gets right to that, right? We, to Dr. McGilchrist's work, right, and his narrative, and the master and his emissary, we have to return the servant to the status of servant, and the servant is finance. It's not the master. And we need to put the servant back in the position of servant and put back as master our civilization, which is the master. It is also the immune system, this complex immune system, and I've written on this the last 3 days, last 2 days, yesterday and the day before, right? Give me 1 second. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Now, I'm not so keen on the happiness one, probably because I'm half Scot and we're probably not capable of happiness. It's just built into us. The English side tries, the English half tries, but part of the reason I don't like the happiness one is because that's been used also as a vector, for hyper-individualization, and then, a backdoor way for the communist Marxist, which is really, we can stop calling it that. It's just parasitism. It's just straight up viral parasitism. So I'm, life, liberty, and the pursuit of, I don't know, but question becomes one, because our civilization is built on a code of laws. It's not the actual law code itself. It is the practice of common law. And rights and privileges built in innately into our law and our civilization of how we interact with the law. So one wonders, I wonder substantively, everything changed, the greatest sin that we allowed our people, the greatest sin that has occurred ever in the English-speaking peoples is we allowed our king to be beheaded. He was fighting for the English peoples. He knew exactly what the problem was. Cromwell came in, and after all the chaos and destruction Cromwell did exactly what King Charles was saying to do. what he was accused of and what he was beheaded for. Cromwell disbanded Parliament, and he denied the foreign bankers' power and other things. Now, he came to that later, right? After, I think, realizing the mistake that had been made. But the point is that I suspect, going all the way back to bloody Pym, and there's one character in history I hate the most, it's Pym, the parliamentarian. I suspect within English law, we could go back to the time, the 1620s to 1640s, and demonstrate foreign influence, heavy foreign influence, and undo most of the, many of these egregious things that have been done since. Because the very underpinnings, the illegality with which these things were brought about by the corruption of the crown by foreigners, the establishment of the City of London and its then economic, financial, insidious control. All these things go back to the 1620 period, right? 1620s into the 1650s. And while there were some attempts in the 1680s into the early 1700s to right some of those, correct some of those errors and wrongs, those were turned right around and have been undone ever since. So one wonders if we can go back to the Act of Settlement. Can we look more closely? Are the Acts of Union themselves invalid?
So my answer now is that the Acts of Union are invalid, and we didn't need it. It was the ruling classes that needed to try and impose that. But getting back to the Act of Settlement, just to make sure people are really clear on this, where it forbids anyone being in any position of profit, or you couldn't be in Parliament or any position of authority unless you were born of English parents, plural. It's really crucial to understand the plurality of that. So you need to have two. The reason why it's so important is because often the people in La La Land would say you're a racist, and I always come back to them and say, so why did we put it in place then? Because it was actually to keep the Dutch out of our parliament, because the Dutch, who were the same race as us but a different culture to us, right, were raping our country and taking our rights and taking the profits of the people and piling it back into Holland, right? That's why they created that rule, which has been there for a long time until 1948. So it was nothing to do with race. There is another crucial element to this, and I always forget the name of it, but in 1708, right, so just after the Union, they created a law because Protestants were being persecuted in Europe, right? And they created this law, and they allowed for Protestants all over Europe to come to England, right? In 1711, Queen Anne stepped in and abolished the law, not repeal it, abolished it, because they started to change the culture of England, right?
Yes.
By allowing all these people from Europe into England, right? And they said, we've got to stop it. She abolished it. And all of those people that had been granted citizenship of England and Scotland had their citizenships revoked, right? And they said, off you go, tiddly-poo, you now are not part of England, because you basically, they was warned by someone else. There's a fantastic one of the great things about England is everything's in writing and everything's recorded. Well, if you go back to Parliament and Hansard of the time, you can actually hear the debate about this very subject. And they said, if you allow all these foreigners to come into our country, and they're not talking about black people or brown people, they're talking about white people from Europe, you are going to destroy what our ancestors built and our freedoms that were given to us, not to them, right? They're not to be given away. And that whole conversation happened. So what we're saying, and to your point, can you go back in history and change these things? Yeah, and that's the beauty of the common law. Stare decisis and precedent is put there so our ancestors who faced them same problems solved them. And instead of us having a civil war, right, we say, how did we solve it then? That's how we did it. So that's what we've got to do now. And the basis of that is basically what we always put forward. But again, just to make sure everyone's aware of this, there are so many things in history that are there in the archives that you are no longer taught, right? Of what actually happened, right?
Yes.
Not the lies, our ancestors. That's why I've got all these old books here. I mean, some of my books are 200, 300, 400 years old, right? But you actually get into the mind of the person telling you the truth about what went on, not the BBC. They're actually telling you the truth. And then all of a sudden you read it and you go, that's not what happened. This happened. And then you get the actual honesty from our ancestors, and they're giving you the opportunity to change things.
All right. So, Graham, I want to put a little bug in your brilliant mind, right? Because it has been much of late of my thoughts after decades and decades of looking at things, right? I firmly suspect, so let's say this, the world created by the Westphalia on continent and the Inglorious Revolution culmination in what would become in the Isles, let's just call them that, set in motion, were structures and systems set in motion against the will of the people, without the participation or will of the people. Now, on the continent's a little different, right? But in England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, and East Anglia, we got those folks over there too, right? There were once a distinct. But point being is that what I suspect that whole system, right, that whole extractive financialist system is so far beyond bankrupt, it is not redeemable. There is no way to redeem it. And my suspicion is this, that the only way in which we do not go through a Roman collapse, a Roman-like collapse, is that, and continental Europeans, you all take care of yourselves, I couldn't care less, right? But we English-speaking peoples, that's my peoples, going back a long ways, right? Going back to the beginning. So I suspect that what's going to happen is we're going to have to reset, to use a technical metaphor, we're going to have to reset back to the last clean copy of our civilization. And that, for us, in the English-speaking world, is the period in the 1620s into the late 1640s.
Yes and no. There were still some terrible things happening there.
Absolutely. We got to fix some things. Yeah.
We've still got to fix some things. So without being too disrespectful to the Scots, the English had, in 1640, had completely outlawed torture. So what the English ruling classes did was transported us to Scotland to be tortured, and that was only and their torture laws was only repealed or abolished in 1708. Right. So what I'm saying is there was a period there where you could pick an Englishman up, drop him off in Scotland, and the Scots would quite merrily torture the person to death.
We do it here. We still do that, right? What we do is send them some CIA black site somewhere, Pakistan or somewhere else. Yeah.
History is just repeating itself.
Yeah.
Some things they did before they've done again, and it's the people that's responsible for it. But could you go back and change this stuff? So let me.
If we could demonstrate that it was done on fraud and deception and done illegally, could we go back and reset to the point where, and to me, the period of time is 1620s into 1640s.
My opinion is we could. And the people on the extreme left say, so you want us walking around in handcarts and donkeys, right? Which is just a nonsense idiotic way of looking at it. What you're doing is resetting, if you want to call it, the conscious of the people, right?
Our civilization.
Back to when we still believed in each other. So I just want to make sure I say this because if you hit on something that's really important, right? People often say, I don't like Islam. It's not Muslims I don't like. And the same thing, I was married to a Catholic for 33 years. We had no problems whatsoever in our marriage because of religion, right? It wasn't her as a Catholic that caused any problems, right? So I want people to understand this, right? If there's two religions that are actually more aligned than for humanity, right, this is the bit that people never get it. People on the extreme, what they call them extreme right, they're just mental and can't think. And extreme left is the same thing, right? And that is that Islam and Christian and real Christians are aligned. And they're aligned because they do not believe in usury, right? It is the usury that is being used to control the population, and the people controlling that usury function, which has destroyed the economies. And it's always been the same. It was the same in the Roman Empire. Every empire, it has been associated with usury. And our ancestors knew how bad it was, and they stepped back from it. And again, in Christianity itself, it was a sin, right? So if you look at Orthodox Christianity, for example, Russia, they're building a new system and it's not based on usury. People are looking, again, there are a group of people, and it doesn't necessarily have to be one group of people, for example, Jews, it doesn't have to be Catholics, it doesn't have to be, there is a group of people with a mindset that know how they need to control us, and it is directly through usury. So if you can eliminate usury, you've solved most of the world's problems.
So there's usury in Sharia as well, by the way. It's called sukuk finance. So it's just done with more steps. Right. So I know we're running out of time here today, but Graham, I think something that we have to look very seriously at, and it is the focus of my work now, is what does a civilizational reset back to the last clean copy of our civilization look like? Not what is the world, to your point, right? Not what does the world around us physically look like, but what is the code of laws, the principles, the norms, et cetera. And give me 1 second. That, of course, has to be reflected in a resetting of the law. And that can be done through the law by articulating fundamental acts that were passed illegally, that are the few underpinnings for all of these other things that have happened over the last 360 years, right? Really taking off in the last 300 years, 320 years. So again, and the Continentals can do this too, but they're going to have to do it country by country, et cetera. And I don't, that's up to them. But in the English common law system, if you can demonstrate, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you can demonstrate that a law was illegally come to, or an act was illegally come to, it invalidates the act or the law. Yeah, and you have to demonstrate it, and you got to.
So
enforcement.
There is a maxim of English law, which is fraud vitiates all.
Yes,
that's it. If you've created a situation by fraud, you've undermined the whole argument that you ever had, even if it's a law. But getting back, so there's two things that I'd say to you.
Yeah.
Is if there was a reset period for me, it would be 1701 and the Acts of Settlement going forward. The second thing I would say is this is why you have to be very careful in certain things that you do, right? Because, and I'll give you an example. Women were not allowed on juries. All these people out there harp on about the Magna Carta, the Magna Carta, the Magna Carta. That's just a fraction of our Constitution. Right. It's a very important fraction, right? But they harp on about juries and juries and juries. And then when I say to them, so you do know that women were not allowed on juries until 1919 in England? And they're like, what? Yeah, they wasn't allowed on juries until 1919. And then I tell these same people, go and read this book. Right? It's the Hamlin Lectures. It's written by Lord Devlin, trial by jury, and he tells you everything you want to know about juries from right back to the beginning. And then you get all these people to say that's not right. So these experts who the Hamlin Lectures, who have provided this information to us free of charge. Anyone out there who thinks they know the law, go and read them lectures. They were done for us. Right? So lay people to read the law from absolute experts. So that's all I would say. You need to be careful. But again, people need to really do need to understand that there has to be a reset, right?
Yes.
And everyone keeps talking about, you've said the second thing, which I completely agree with. You're not interested in all these other countries. The only countries you need to be interested in is the United. So if it was the United States of America for me, it's the individual states of the United States of America. They need to go back to governing themselves. Federal government out of and stop federal governments educating children. There's an old saying, and it's a true saying, if you send your children to a Roman school, don't be surprised when they come back supporting Caesar, right? And that's why education is from the parents. I was talking to someone earlier today, and I said, if your parents was told something, your parents taught you something, and it was wrong, did they lie to you, or did someone lie to them? And then she said to me, no, someone's lied to them. And I said, do you understand the phrase, everything you've ever been told is a lie? And she said, no, I do. And I said, that is how they've constructed this against the people. Right?
Yeah.
And the only people that can take it back are people like us. That's why they're
Yeah.
trying to. That's why they want to shut down the internet now. That's why they don't
Well,
want the internet.
it's that's all a threat. They can't shut down the internet because they would lose control. The what parasites do when because that's what these are and that's how they work. Candida is a very, very difficult parasite to remove from people, and what it will do is when you start to remove it, it will manipulate the excretions that it lets out that will stimulate your biome and your immune system in certain ways. It'll throw up all kinds of signals that'll make you go eat things or drink things or do things that recreates the environment, the chaos environment in which the candida thrives. And the more you function, the more you work to remove the candida with antivirals, etc. I think it's antivirals, not antibiotics. Yeah, it will send up more and more noise and create more and more noise and more noise signals until you just give up. Because now you're in a battle, and it'll make you sick, and it'll stimulate other viruses and other things to activate, etc. Well, that's what most of what they're doing is. They're deeply embedded, and we're starting to see it in great detail and start to respond appropriately with all these tools that we have available and knowledge and time that we have available. So, of course, what are they going to do? They're going to act like Candida, and they're going to throw up all kinds of other things that we have to fight, which are very dangerous, but they don't care if they ever succeed. They already have total control or near total control. And actually putting those things in place are so damn expensive, they don't have the money for that system anyways. The whole complex system they're talking about rolling out, they don't have the capital for that. They don't have the money for it. And the only way to get the money for it is somebody's got to pay for it, or they just make it up. It doesn't work, but they don't care if it works. It's just throwing up something that makes you fight something current now medically that you got, to use the body and virus analogy again, so that you're not continuing to remove the actual fundamental parasite. And people look at Candida. Candida, it's a virus. I believe it's a virus or bacteria. I can't remember which, but it's brilliant. And when you try to remove it, it throws up all kinds of things. Makes you think all kinds of stuff in all these complex ways. It'll activate other viruses and latent things, and it is almost impossible. So, anyways, even if you start removing the heavy metals from your body that it thrives on, the toxins that's created by that, it'll start attacking you. It's brilliant. Well, that's how these people work. It's exactly how they work. They just throw up all this stuff to distract us. So for me, it's like legally, the period where everything went wrong, right? There's always attempts, there's always mistakes, etc. But where everything went wrong with the English civilization and the English system, which America and everybody, we're all part of, right? Was that period from the 1620s into the late 1600s. Now, yes, some things were done in there, right? But there is a reset that has to happen, and that's the period we have to go back to. Now, to your point, without losing all of the good things that were done too. And some of those things, if we do some of those things are built on pillars that were fraud and go away, what we have to do have it has a replacement for that. Let's go, hey, that was a good thing. Let's, do something now that's on a solid footing, a solid legal footing that replicates that, or is current to our period. So that's what you do when you're cutting away necrotic flesh, right? From a sick host, is when you're cutting away necrotic flesh. Sometimes you're cutting away some good flesh too, but you're doing so also fortifying the body, sometimes putting in little filament structures, etc., so new healthy flesh can grow back.
Yep.
Right?
Thank you, Ian. Graham, anything you want to say? And then we're going to need to finish up soon.
No, I mean the main thing. I mean, when you reference the English system, I think it's really difficult for people to grasp what actually happened when the English left England and went to America, in effect, it was the Whigs that built America. And they had a different philosophy, completely different to the Tories. The Tories were, in effect, they're still called it now, the robber barons. They were the landed gentry. They were the people that stole the common land off the people. They were the ones who created and assisted the Enclosures Acts, took our common land.
Yep.
So what you're actually trying to do is be more directly modelled on a Whig system, rather than the Tory system. And then you want as many as independents as you can that just believe in constitution. Like me, I'm an independent, really. Even though we've got a political party, we don't have whips. You can't influence me. If I'm representing the people that have elected me, I represent them. I don't represent the people that are trying to what's the name for them? Where they're trying to buy their what they need. They buy their regulations. So that's what you've got to go back to. So the Whig system was actually a better system. They proved it, and they proved it massively with the United States of America, because what I always say to people, the United Independent States of America, which is crucial to remember that, people must understand that America is the greatest nation on earth, not because of its populace and not because of its size, because its population isn't the greatest on earth, and its size. I mean, Russia's massively bigger than the United States of America. In fact, every other country. But it created a populace that worked together, and they was free. They had liberties. There still has to be a rule of law, but at the end of the day, they proved the concept, because now technically they are the richest nation on earth. And the people that are destroying that, in effect, are when America started to import British Tories. And that is literally what has caused the problem for
What
America.
is the Rhodes Scholarship Program, and why was it set up? Right. Yeah. So if I can, Graham, and Rich, terribly sorry, if I can give one thing, if we were to distill down, what do we need to restore in all of its many forms? What we must restore is the commons. And that's not just common lands, that's common rights, common freedoms, common assembly, common, sovereignty falls in that.
The commons in Parliament. It's been stolen from us.
Right. We must restore the commons. So whatever the reset period is that we go back to is that period where the commons were still legally, when the commons still legally existed and the crown and government protected the commons.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the biggest commons right now is the retirements of the folks that are retiring out. And they're trying to steal that as much as they can, as hard as they can. So,
a return to common sense.
Common sense. That's Thomas Paine.
All that intelligence that's part of the commons. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Graham. I have all the links in the description below. I would love to do this with you again. Really, really appreciate it. And everybody, please, 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 there are protections for us within the English Constitution. So go check out the English Constitution Society or Party and join, maybe if it's your bag, but learn about the English Constitution. This is Rich and EM and Graham, GM, EM and Rich signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Boost your testosterone naturally and rev up your engine with Immense Boost. bit.ly/CryptoRichBoost and order your testosterone boost today.